Okay, welcome everyone to the last talk of the conference, and this is Unicode Emoji. How do we standardize that je ne sais quoi? We have Maggie, Ronan, and Liat, Berdugo as presenters.
Hi everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here to round out the conference, and thanks especially to the program committee and the Unicode Consortium for having us here. So I'm Maggie Ronan. I'm an emoji enthusiast, and I have a background in building software and community at software startups in San Francisco, most recently on the engineering team at the crowdfunding company Indiegogo. During undergrad, I majored in digital media studies.
And hi, I'm Liat, Berdugo, and this wouldn't be a technical conference without a technical failure, so I will be holding my microphone. I am an artist, a writer, a curator, and a professor at the University of San Francisco. I teach new media art, and much of my work deals with attitudes and beliefs towards technology, and that's specifically why I'm here, right, and why I'm giving this talk together with Maggie.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us, and we're so excited to share with you our presentation, Unicode Emoji, how do we standardize the je ne sais, I don't really speak French. So, an introduction. So after 3 days of mostly technical talks, you might be looking at an abstract like ours and thinking, what am I getting myself into? So to give you a sense of place and time, I'm going to give you a little glimpse into how this talk came to be. So for the third time, I'm Maggie, but this is me with a hat. Several months ago, I was trying to send a text message to a friend of mine using my Android smartphone. And at some point, I was searching for just the right emoji to express what I was trying to say. And like I sometimes do, I got distracted, and I got to musing as I was flipping through the emoji offerings on my phone. A couple things stood out to me. The structure of the emoji we're organized in seemed kind of arbitrary and a little bit confusing. And the second thing was that I had seen the same set of offerings in the same way across different platforms. I had changed the messaging app on my phone at some point, and I still saw the same thing. And then when I send messages to my friends on iPhones, I more or less expect that they're going to see the emoji that I send them. So these observations and kind of what I know about making software got me to thinking, and it led me to the conclusion that the only thing that really seemed to make sense was that there was some sort of standard library of emoji that's made available across multiple platforms. I thought that sounded really cool and also like a pretty ambitious undertaking, and the idea kind of made me want to go back to bed. But I didn't, and like any good internet sleuth, I started Google searching, and I eventually landed up on the website for the Unicode Consortium and learned about this very conference. I didn't submit just yet, though. Pretty soon thereafter, I was at the birthday party of my good friend Liat, and I was still thinking about emoji. Knowing her background in new media and her interests in kind of the cultural implications of the digital world, I thought she might be a sympathetic audience for this kind of strange pursuit I was on. Very fortunately for me, she saw me there and also raised me, joining me to submit a talk for this conference. So flash forward a few months of beefing up on emoji history, keeping up with the current events in the emoji world, and learning some linguistics principles, and here we are. So we call this talk, How Do We Standardize That Je Ne Sais Information Desk Person, or Unicode 1F481. However, it was changed after we had submitted, and we were told that unfortunately the program committee took the emoji out because some won't be able to see an appropriate glyph depending on their browser. Well, that's exactly the problem, we thought to ourselves.
So since the emoji were first adopted by the Unicode standard in 2010, there have been lots of emoji splintering, thank you, with so-called emoji character sets. Yes?
Can you hold it a little ways away from you? It's a little loud.
Too loud. How about this? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, great, okay. There's been a lot of emoji splintering, with emoji character sets coming from all over. So these are the Seinfeld emoji. For those of you who are politically inclined, we have the Bernie emoji. And since Maggie and I are particularly interested in pop culture, I would like to introduce you to Kanye West emoji. This is displeased Kanye. And that follows shortly after, this is Con-yay. Right? So this talk, the concept of Unicode emoji is quite broad. And as Maggie and I were working on this, the kind of key point that we boiled down to was the following question, which is, what are the implications of standardizing a linguistic system in which ambiguity and elasticity are core features? That's our key question. And we're going to cycle through sort of 4 case studies to begin exploring this key question. But before we get there, we want to dip back in and whet your appetite back into the realm of pop culture. And I present to you the forearm of Drake. If you do not know who Drake is, he is a popular rapper. And on his forearm, he has U+1F64F, person with folded hands tattoo. Now, this sparked one of the biggest debates of all time. Did he mean a high five in climax? Or did Drake mean a namaste, a sort of thank you, a bow? And this debate unfolded across media, right? In a case of investigative journalism on entertainment news, they decided that Drake's emoji tattoo is a praying hands tattoo and not a high five. Find out why, a fantastic clickbait title, right? You want to know. So find out why. So here's why. They said a high five, when you high five someone, you do it with opposite hands. So you would never have this kind of meeting. But yet Maggie and I, we can high five with mirroring hands. So this debate is still unresolved. We'll come back to this in a moment. So let's begin with our first case study. Hashtag eggplant. Hashtag eggplant. Now, if you were not in the emoji Q&A this morning and you missed Mark Davis's suggestion to Google sexting and emoji together.
It wasn't a suggestion.
I'm sorry, it wasn't a suggestion, it was a
commentary.
a commentary that should you have the desire to do so, you might come up with a lot of results. Many of you know this emoji has taken on a particular referent, right, in American culture in specific. And so here's our case study, and we start this case study with emoji hashtags. So in April of this year, Instagram, as many of you know, released emoji hashtags, and it was a big deal. And they called this emojineering, the science of emojis. And the man behind emojineering was this man, Thomas Stimson. And Maggie and I got Thomas Stimson on the phone shortly after he moved to New York. He's a software engineer on the data team at Instagram in New York. And he was also an engineer at Hyperlapse, and he knew much too much about emoji. And the first thing we asked him was, Thomas, how did this project begin? And he said, I was sitting at a bar with Kevin and Mike, the Instagram founders, and one of them was getting married in a desert and really wanted a hashtag for his wedding and wanted the hashtag to be this, cactus wedding. And they were all joking, and Thomas said, I can build that for you. Sure. And this is how emojineering began at Instagram. And so Thomas, before he implemented it, began asking all of these questions about what does it mean to implement this at Instagram? And asking semantic questions like, for a given emoji, what English words are semantically similar? Or English phrases might actually be more correct here, right? So he found that there were correlations that existed between phrases like LOL and hee hee with laughing my eyes out emoji.
or between XOXO and heart, and between OMG and emoji, right? And Thomas began making maps of semantically correlated emojis that looked something like this, with face clusters together in the center, and all these other emojis clustering with semantic meanings in different places. And he also began asking the following question: are these emoji also replacing the usage of words? And what he found on Instagram was that actually the use of emoji is anti-correlated with the use of internet slang. So as the use of emoji rises, the use of internet slang on Instagram was decreasing. And so then I asked him, well, okay, emojineering, what did it actually entail, right? Like, what decisions were you making? In the last session, we saw what the regex looked like. But I also wanted to know what decisions he was making. And one of the decisions that struck me most notably was the following. Should photos tagged under Santa with this light skin tone be indexed under this color Santa skin? Or Santa with no skin tone modifier? And at Instagram, they decided no. Right now, they're indexing all emoji hashtags with skin tone modifiers separately. Right? So basically, we have a racially segregated hashtag Instagram. So this is what's going on right now. So problems of normalization, right? It's interesting because Thomas said he didn't want to whitewash Instagram, right? He didn't want to tag everything under maybe the most white or the Bart Simpson color. But then the other solution also doesn't seem like, I think someone over there actually face-palmed when I said that. So, well, all of these are kind of not satisfactory. And then, of course, you get to hashtag eggplant. So I said, Thomas, what's going on there? He said, we did a preemptive banning of eggplant. So there's a policy about the banning of nudity on Instagram. And he said people were able to type hashtag eggplant, but they couldn't search by it. Right? Instagram has a banning of many words, and this was one of the ones they actually preemptively or prophylactically banned. And Thomas says, I would say that emoji are infinitely more ambiguous than words, and we know that emoji have non-single semantics, right? As Peter brought up in the session earlier today, this emoji that stands for bank has the characters BK, but this has taken on slang in Japanese for the meaning bakareru. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it's a slang term meaning evading one's responsibilities. And I want to end this case study by saying hashtag peach, which is sort of the corollary to hashtag eggplant, is not banned on Instagram. So I'll leave that as food for thought.
So we can search for that.
Yes, you can. It's not a suggestion. Not a suggestion.
It's food for thought.
Food for thought indeed. And now we have a second case study. And this is another place where we're starting to see tension in the standardization of feelings-based glyphs. And I want to start by clearing up why I'm saying feelings-based glyphs in this case. So we see on one side we have emoticons, which to the end user are text strung together and then meaning is read into them. Whereas on the right side we have our friends, the emoji, which have images, like a pictorial thing. In the cases I'm going to share here, most of the evidence submitted is actually emoticons as opposed to emoji. But we feel that the patterns observed in the way the emoticons have been referenced can be pretty easily translated over into emoji as well. So it continues to be relevant. Okay, so the first trial that I want to share is that of Mohammed Hamza Khan. And this is a man who, when he was 19 last year, along with his two younger siblings, was detained at Chicago O'Hare Airport, allegedly because they were on their way to join ISIL in Syria. In his detention hearing, the prosecutor actually cited Hamza Khan's younger sister's emoticon usage on Twitter after she had watched an ISIL propaganda video called Salil Sarwam, I'm sorry I don't speak Arabic either, as evidence of the siblings' radicalization. So the fact that she had tweeted something indicated how radicalized the whole family was. And the quote from the prosecutor from the detention hearing is here. Apparently after viewing the video, she tweeted out her twisted delight in ISIL's terror. For example, she tweeted, "The end of Salil Sarawam," and then an emoticon of a heart and an emoticon of a smiling face. Now, can we get enough meaning out of these symbols in a tweet to reliably glean that she intended twisted delight with that tweet? So the second trial is that of Anthony Alonis, and this is a man who was convicted and actually sentenced to 3 years in prison for violent threats on Facebook against his ex-wife and others, and he quoted rap lyrics, among other things. He appealed the sentencing, arguing that not only did a reasonable person need to interpret the post to be threatening, but also that he, the poster, had to have original intent to put the target into fear. His petition for appeal went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they actually cited his emoticon usage on Facebook to show lack of original intent in what he had posted. And so, sorry, this is a little graphic. An example post that he had said was, "I'm not going to rest until your body is a mess, soaked in blood and dying from all the little cuts." And this is a quote from the petition that he and his lawyers filed to appeal his sentencing. And they said, "The petitioner ended a post with an emoticon of a face sticking its tongue out, which she understood to be an indication the post is meant in jest." So if I follow up a super violent message with an emoticon, we can negate what I was saying and say that what I was saying was meant in jest. As I said, the Supreme Court took this case, and obviously not for just this reason, but it was eventually overturned, and a new precedent was established in the Supreme Court. And finally, we have the case of the online anonymous black market website, the Silk Road, and Ross Ulbricht. And this relates to the theme of having emoticons in the courtroom, because a lot of the case, because there was so much, a lot of the case hinged on tying Ross Ulbricht to the online person that is the Dread Pirate Roberts, who was established to be the proprietor of the Silk Road. So there was a lot of digital evidence. And Ulbricht's defense attorney argued that emoticons were vital evidence, and there was some debate as to how they should be communicated to the jury. Among other things, the judge agreed that they did have significance, and they ended up reading chat transcripts out loud, and they were instructed to say the word emoticon where an emoticon was used. So here we have an example. Baron Syntax is the Dread Pirate Roberts' closest confidant online, and they seem to be having a little fun with intentionally doing typos. So he says, "No questions, please, but you can ask me a question if you left the emoticon." And then he says, "I am the grammar fascist." And then me, who is the Dread Pirate Roberts, responds, "I can tell, emoticon." So there's a lot of discussion, and we can see that people agreed that there was significance, that we should hold space for the emotional statement or emotional sentiment that was meant in the chats. But it was unclear how to best communicate it to the jury. So the meaning remained ambiguous. So to tie this together, to bring these three cases together, recently on NPR, the assistant director and clinical instructor at the CyberLab Clinic at Harvard was quoted saying, "I think these types of mechanisms to indicate tone or intent could really come to play at trial, especially in criminal cases where the intention of a person may really be at issue." So what can we learn from these cases? These high-profile court cases shows that people are looking to interpret the meaning of emoji in definitive ways. But can we expect to be able to derive intent from an emoji? is this kind of high-stakes scenario being thought about as we're maturing the body of Unicode emoji? And if not, what would it look like to take these kind of scenarios into account?
Okay, case study number 4, emojis for food allergens. So part of the research that Maggie and I did for this talk entailed that both of us joined the Unicode listserv. And I love that listserv. Probably most of you are on it. But over the course of the summer, I got the following email from William Overington. Is he well known?
Yes.
Okay, so on Saturday, July 25th, William Overington began a discussion about this proposal on the Unicode consortium. He said an interesting discussion entitled Preliminary Proposal to Add Emoji Characters for Food Allergens by Hero was added to the UTC document register yesterday. This is a welcome development. Right? And I'm sure many of you have seen this proposal. And it said that emoji should cover characters representing major food allergens. It would enable people to understand what nutritions are used in food in foreign countries and safely select meals. Right? So I'll say, this proposal was not passed, and a new revision is going through and being looked at in the next meetings next week. And I'm bringing this case and all of the kind of ephemera conversations that happened around it to you as a case study, because I think it really, really highlights a lot of topics and issues about what emoji means to the consortium and more broadly. Okay, so it's really not about the proposal at all, and it's much more about what the this beautiful discussion was that unfolded over the course of a number of weeks. Okay, so this document proposed 12 new characters. And I actually, in a private email correspondence I had with William Overington, he told me that the proposal had a special interest for him because he is a gluten-avoiding vegan who avoids spicy food. Okay, so if you've seen this proposal, you know that it included such characters as peanuts, soybeans, buckwheat, sesame, kiwi fruit, celery, lupin, and mustard, as well as revisions to current emoji like walnuts, eggs, milk, and grain. And I actually quite liked the way that the document went and grabbed images from the internet. So it said, for a visual representation of buckwheat, we suggest to use several seeds of buckwheat. And this image is from Zynga. I used to work at a gaming company. I have a background in mathematics and then actually worked at Playdom, Zyngam's competitor. So I love that this was scraped from Zynga. For a visual representation of sesame, we suggest to use a pile of sesame seeds. And for a visual representation of mustard, we suggest to use a bottle of mustard. Okay, so what was the conversation like on the listserv? So there were a number of sentiments, right? There were sentiments like this: don't trust your life to an emoji. Andrew wrote on July 29th, if you are likely to swell up and die if you eat a peanut, you will not want to trust your life to an emoji picture of a peanut, which would be easily mistaken for something else or rendered as a square box where there was no And then there were also battle cries, right? There were also sentiments like the following: encode all ears. Marcel wrote, I find it urgent to encode all these ears as wheat, buckwheat, and so on, because actually only 2 kinds of cereals have their ear in Unicode: maize and rice. So there was this urgent cry to encode all of the ears, not just 2 of them. And then there were other kinds of sentiments, such as emojis are not for labeling things. Michael Everson said, I do not understand the rationale. Emojis are not for labeling things. They're for the playful expressions of emotions. And this, I bring this up because it sparked this sort of existential debate of what are emojis for, right? What are they for? And the proposal to use them for food allergens, I think, tapped on this idea of, could they have single semantics, right? Because if you're using them for food allergens, you're really asking them to have a single, precise semantic meaning. And if you look at the Q&A section on the Unicode website, there's this question: do emoji characters have single semantics? Answer: no. Right? And so then the discussion went to this. Well, William said, well, if that's the case, why don't we call them the precise emoji? And let's make them something separate than emoji, and we'll make them the precise emoji. It's something new. And all of this kind of accumulated with the following sentiment, which was, we don't do speculative design at Unicode. So as Ms. Freitag, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, said, Unicode cannot be so constrained that it encodes only universally accepted icons, but it should be constrained to not encode characters on the foot of possible conventions that are not actually demonstrated anywhere. There's currently no convention for denoting allergens by emoji, so that usage is something speculative at the moment. So there's this idea that at the Unicode Consortium, we don't do speculative design. And I thought this was a really interesting line in the sand, right? Because there's a kind of the opposite question you could ask, which is, what's not speculative about adding emoji in Unicode, right? We're going to come back to that, but let's go to our final case study, which is representation.
So in our final case study, I'm going to talk through what we're referring to as representation in Unicode Emoji. And that's the notion that inclusion of a concept in the Unicode Emoji library is seen as representation and acknowledge of that concept on a global scale. So the first example, and this is to say it's seen by the outside public and users of emoji. So the first example that we have is the petition for the ASL I love you handshake emoji. And this is an Oregon-based team that began petitioning to include the ASL I love you handshake in the body of emoji. And the grounds for this is that it's a uniting symbol amongst several different groups within the deaf community that unites the deaf community together. And that by including this symbol in the body of Unicode Emoji, it would be bridging the deaf community to what is seen as sort of the mainstream body of emoji that's represented in Unicode. And of course, there are ways to type like hand shapes using different keyboards and such that are much more communicative, but this is a symbolic representation of the community in Unicode Emoji. And the next step, we have the Disarm the iPhone campaign, and this is a campaign that was run in partnership with New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. And they say that by removing the gun emoji, we'll show America wants stricter access to guns. And they're petitioning Apple for this, I guess, so maybe it doesn't apply 100% to our body of Unicode emoji, but we can see that they're seeing that symbol of the gun as a universal or an acceptance of this notion that they don't think should be shared. And then finally, we have the case of a Russian senator who, when he heard that there were same-sex emoji made available to youth and to all users of social media in Russia, reacted to that by saying that it was against a controversial law that exists in Russia that says that homosexual propaganda has to be kept from minors. So he initiated an investigation to see if it made sense for them to go about removing same-sex emoji from the eyes of people in Russia. So by sharing these examples, what I want to communicate is that regardless of the intent of those who standardize, the public sees inclusion in the body of Unicode emoji to equate with some sort of societal acknowledgement of a concept, for better or for worse. So how do we take this into account when we're standardizing emoji? Is it the responsibility of the Unicode Consortium to ensure equal representation of concepts? Like, that seems like a lot. Is this a democratic process? And if not, how do we change the perceptions that emoji users have of the purpose of Unicode emoji? So now that I've shared those questions with you, segue back to Drake.
Okay, so back to our mystery. So Drake's tattoo, was it a high five or was it a praying hands or a namaste of sorts? In a since deleted comment on Instagram, Drake wrote, "I pity the fool who high fives in 2014." But that comment was deleted. It mysteriously disappeared, leaving only a single screenshot in its wake. And we know how reputable screenshots are online. So I wanted to ask Drake himself. So I rejoined Twitter to reach out to Drake. I said, "Drake, are you out there? I want to talk about your tattoo for the Unicode Consortium." And Drake did respond to that tweet, so I went a little further. I said, "Drake, you know what tweet I'm waiting for. Let's talk about your tattoo." And I thought by adding a few images, perhaps that'd get his attention. That's Drake on my shoulders. But apparently, Drake does not work that way, and neither does celebrity. So we're going to end with what a speculative exchange between Drake and me would look like. So Maggie will be Drake.
All right, girl, you've got my attention.
What I want to know is, it's not a high five, right? If it's praying hands, what are you praying for?
My prayers are mine, girl. I gotta keep some things to myself.
Fair enough. Do you like that people aren't sure what person with folded hands means to you?
Liat, I still pity the fool that still high fives in 2015, just like in 2014.
So what are our calls to action from this? We know that Unicode is the foundation for all text and modern software, right? We don't need to tell this to you. You know that. That's why you're here. And we know that your mission is to enable people around the world to use computers in any language. And that you do this through the Unicode standard, right? Through your character encoding. And I think one of the calls to action that Maggie and I have is that, in the realm of speculative design, that to kind of accept or realize or own that the kind of acceptance of what will be and will not be in the realm of the Unicode standard in emoji is much more in the realm of speculative design than a lot of the other standardization that happens. And that comes with its gifts and challenges, if you will. And that also comes with its gatekeepering, and that also comes with its gifts and challenges. And that it is more speculative design than we might like to think. So thank you to those who helped us to prepare this talk. And bye. And we have time for questions and for a discussion as well.
I have two questions. Did you really email William J.J. Overington?
The answer is yes.
What else did he say?
Well, he sent me a 40-page PDF of a language that I did read thoroughly.
Localized sequences?
Yes, that was the PDF that he emailed.
What did you think?
You
don't need to answer.
Let's not get into that.
Next.
The second question that I have, and this is more of a comment than a question. So regarding this, I really agree with Asmus regarding that we don't do a speculative addition to the Unicode, right? Because there are characters in Unicode that if we were doing a speculative design, they never would have been in Unicode. Like there are some symbols that, like for example, there are 4 or 5 swastikas, right? They don't have anything to do with the Nazi swastika, but if we were thinking that these are related to Nazi swastika, they wouldn't have been in Unicode. So that's what he's talking about, actually.
Yeah, I see that point, and I think that probably delineating what's speculative and not speculative design in other language systems is much clearer than in the case with emoji. So in the case that you're mentioning, I believe that line might be much more fixed. However, I believe in the case of emoji, that line is actually not very clear. And there are many ways you can begin to try to draw that line scientifically, right? You can begin to show, well, we believe the hamburger emoji to be quite popular. And so if you can show that this new emoji has the same popularity of search as hamburger on Google Images, then that's our new machine for it's not speculative anymore. But that's a formula, right? And every formula has a basis, a set of assumptions that are behind it. And those set of assumptions are a form of speculation, I think, at any point that you make them. So they're rigorous, right? And they're put into place. But I think it's much more speculative in the case you're bringing to the forefront.
I have a statement and a question. So I was trying to select which session to go to for the last session of the conference, and I was thinking the mobile internationalization testing toolbox would be the one I should go to, but I wanted to go to something that would entertain me, and I was right. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
My other reflection, or possibly a question for you, is the part about the peanut and the precise emoji. When I hear the word peanut, it doesn't necessarily mean the nut. Peanut can be used as a term of endearment. It can be used in slang like peanut gallery and such. So we don't have a precise definition of the word peanut either. So why do we hold emojis to a higher standard than regular words in the sense that we expect them to have a precise definition when the original word does not? So that's why I was wondering what your opinion is on that.
Right. Well, I think we currently don't. I think in the case of emoji for food allergens, there would be a desire for them to have a single semantic meaning.
But that semantic meaning would be made up from the context, would it not?
There was a lot of discussions on the Unicode listserv saying, well, maybe let's give them their own code block so that we can do it that way. But yeah, it is all much more contextual. I think that emoji, yeah, and Mark, I want you to jump in here in a minute, but yeah, of course, words are also ambiguous, right? Always. And I think emoji are also ambiguous. But say you take the up arrow emoji, right? And you put that in a comment on an Instagram photo. Does that emoji, is it pointing up to the photo above? Is it meaning that, hey, that photo is up high? Is it meaning like, look up? I mean, these things are, I think, much more ambiguous than words, a lot of people would say. And yeah, Mark, go ahead and jump in there.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. First is, it's interesting the different conventions that I've seen for two words that are very important in expression, but which we don't really have emoji for, and that's I and you. And so you see all sort of people sort of dancing around different ways of saying that, especially across languages, because there's nothing that really corresponds. I mean, you can use a picture of an eye, but that, of course, really only works for English. And I guess for you, you could have a sheep. But the main point is that if you continue to do research, the Unicode list is just an open forum for anyone, and nobody on there in particular speaks for Unicode. So I just want to make sure you realize that William
Well, and other people.
and other people on that list, they're just any random people who want to speak their mind on that.
Like me.
But it's an open forum. It doesn't have anything necessarily to do with the actual discussions around, for example, food allergens.
In the back?
So an additional comment I have to this discussion, because I think it raises a lot of really interesting questions, right? But I think from what it sounds like to me, almost foundational question is emoji supposed to be like the universal language now, right? That like is for everyone, or is it just another situation, or in such a way that like it now transcends languages that use words, written words, right? And those words, almost like in a tree, can be attributed to this like root emoji symbol that kind of embodies that, or is emoji just yet another language to add to the list of languages that we now have on our planet, right? And so like, I think that would be another way of kind of phrasing this discussion, because if it's the latter, then, you know, it's just another situation in which one symbol could, you know, fundamentally be ambiguous and represent all of these things, or even represent its own thing in its own way because it's its own language, as opposed to like the symbol of a peanut directly representing like the English representation for a peanut.
Yes, I would like to make a couple of comments. One is the fact that if you talk about food allergens, there are legal requirements on how you must present them in an understandable form. Emojis are not understandable to the vast majority of the people. So that would be an additional burden. It would not reduce the amount of data that would have to be put into whatever list. It would just add another element, which actually would be redundant. So the benefit of doing that isn't there. Then there's another point which has not been necessarily fully understood. If something is encoded in Unicode, that is for good. So you don't want to encode the things that really don't take off at all, because they will be there till the end of Unicode.
That's another reason why not to have Justin Bieber.
Or Kanye, right? Permanence in the digital world is an important question.
It was fun, but I think most of your case studies were actually kind of limited to the North American culture. And based on those, you make the assumption that emoji is understandable worldwide. That's kind of a big gap, I think. And like, to put it in kind of a Unicode word, I think it's like saying anyone who can understand capital letter A can read English. And if you actually wanted democratic mapping of concepts to numbers, Wikipedia already does that. So, like, I'm not sure which part of the problem you are trying to point to. Whether the problem that these images are not universally understandable, there's miscommunication when you represent yourself with these icons, or the problem of actually the process that puts these icons into the text that kind of you can copy paste and search for.
I think actually we're arguing that the ambiguity of meaning is part of their core. It's part of the core feature of them, and the fact that like an emoji is ambiguous might be like one of the flirtatious reasons that somebody sends it in a text message.
Indeed.
And so if like whether it's understood or not understood between people, that clear understanding is actually not the case even in North America sometimes. And so I hear you that a lot of our cases were drawn from North America, and right, we are looking at Drake and Kanye and American pop stars, right? We're drawing from American pop culture, but the argument we're making is that these characters, part of their core feature, I think, is that they are somewhat ambiguous, and that leads to certain features that make them actually really lovely to use. And that ambiguity
is that assign a kind of different pole to the standardization that happens on the other hand. Yeah, there was someone.
I just want to make a small comment. If you look at TR51, actually,
What does TR stand for?
this is Technical Report 51, which is about emoji. And if you look at the selection factors, one part of it says that multiple usage of a symbol,
Right.
it increases the chance of it being able to emoji.
Which is
So
exactly
actually,
the ambiguity.
the thing is that, like, you know, some of those symbols that they banned, which I don't know why they banned, and those things, if they were being proposed and they were proposed as this and that, probably they would have a chance to get encoded. I mean, we are having them already, but this is part of the criteria. That multiple usage of one symbol in a text context raises the chance.
Right, right.
Yeah, well, one note, we moved that out and expanded it a bit, and it's now under unicode.org/emoji/selection.
Oh, it has a own
So
page.
it's got its own page.
So it's not in the TR?
It's in the current version of the TR, but we're planning to supplant it and move it out.
One of the arguments I've heard against emojis being encoded in Unicode is that really we ought to change it so text handling can include arbitrary images in text messages in all places, including email headings and other places. How would that be different than emojis? In other words, what if we got rid of all emojis and let people put little pictures? Would it change the cultural usage?
So that there'd be no limitation on the image, it could be any image at all, you know,
Right.
people could.
I think a really good example of that is the community on Twitch.tv. If you're not familiar with Twitch.tv, is a streaming service that people use to stream themselves doing activities like playing video games. And as part of the chat community, they include little images along with their text, and it's only limited by what people basically want. But even though it's pretty close to unlimited, people settle on a couple standard images to provide standard reactions like sarcasm or surprise or annoyance. So I think regardless of whether you put a structure of the set of images or not, people are going to need the way to communicate some basic emotions and values. That's why they, emojis that's from the popular.
So it becomes like a vocabulary, really. That,
But I think also to add to that point too is just like, I mean, I don't mean to be too blunt, but like people get really lazy, and sometimes they don't want to add their own images to things, and sometimes it's a lot easier when there's something already built in for them to just use. And so like, if in the absence of available images, then sure, I'll add my own image to describe sarcasm. But if the community has been using this one particular image to describe sarcasm over the period of time, then I'm just going to reuse that, right? Like, why introduce something new and then have to provide context for that? And so I think emoji provides a really interesting way to do that, because I think we'll find a way to standardize, as was pointed out.
Just one comment. Nobody's talked about the really serious issue involving emoji. There's a really serious issue, and that is when I talk about any three emoji that I like, I say any three emoji, and Craig says any three emojis. So which is right?
What would it be? Emoji in some emojis?
It's three emoji or three emojis.
What would it be without the S?
Just that's
That
some
emoji is plural without the S.
whether you see it as a Japanese word.
It's like sheep or cow.
One more thing to vote on next week.
Isn't it like it's a Japanese word? That's why English plural takes to it?
It has different.
I knew this would spark conversation.
What is the Japanese plural of G?
There is no plural. There is no plural.
It's emoji.
It's like sheep. It's like sheep.
Oh, but nobody in
Okay.
Japanese is good
We'll
for
end with the
scripts.
great singular plural debate. Thank you so much.
Better contribute to 1 week.
So I would say there are two forms of bonji, one in Japan and one in Korea. And usually there are two bonjis, Korean and Japanese. Like the word bonji in Japanese. There are two bonjis.
Only my preference. Yeah, I would say emoji.
How would you Chinese dog. How do they say they tell themselves?
I don't think Chinese is
They can tell them
What about my hijab wearing woman with a machine gun?
You don't even think.